Let's recreate KEYLETH's Earth outfit from VOX MACHINA together. All you need to sew this yourself is light green and dark green jersey, dark green lining fabric, yellow elastic piping or bias tape, dark brown, light brown and beige jersey, scissors, bobbins or fabric clips, fabric glue, basic sewing equipment, and of course a sewing machine. For all jerseys in this project, use a thick variant like Roma jersey for a better fit. I'll link you the products I used in the video description. My patterns can be found in my Etsy shop. You can click the link in the description too. Okay, let's get ready to craft. First, tape the pattern together and cut the pattern pieces. Copy the patterns on your thick jersey and lining fabric in the color needed for the pattern piece. Add as much seam allowance as you need and cut them out. When done cutting, start with the lining for the dress flap front and back and sew them together. Do this for the mirrored lining pieces too. After that, sew the trims to the dress flap front and back pieces as seen here. Use an elastic stitch on all jersey parts. Iron the pieces and then add glue to the seam allowance. Fold it to the outside and iron it again. Then you can finally sew dress flap front and back to each other. Repeat these steps for the mirrored pieces too. Then get one lining and the corresponding piece, put them right on right side and sew them together. Leave a little slit open and cut down the seam allowance to a few millimeters before turning it around. Repeat this for the second flap and you end up with two finished pieces that we set aside for later. Next step is for everyone who wants to make their own piping only. Take some round elastic and elastic bias tape. Wrap the elastic in the bias tape. Use a piping foot to stitch down close to the elastic. And done! Now you have elastic piping. Alternatively, you can use only elastic bias tape for your dress detailed lines. Now take the two dress front middle pieces, glue the piping detail in place on one of them. And sew them together like this. Then glue piping on the other piece as well and stitch the two pipings in place in the middle to form a neat V shape as seen here. Make sure that the piping is long enough on both sides to cross over to the back of the dress. Now sew the dress shoulder pieces to the front middle parts. And after that, sew the dress back middle to the shoulder pieces like this. Then you can glue the rest of the piping to the brink of the seam allowance on all pieces as seen here. Join the piping in the back and stitch it together by hand. Now take the dress front upper and dress back upper piece, or pieces, as I will add a zipper in the back here, and sew them together as indicated. Take the dress collar pieces, put them right on right side and sew them to the outside seam. Cut down the corners, turn them around and iron it. Then you can finally sew the collar to the neckline as seen here. Iron it again afterwards and add your zipper. It is easier to slip into when you add the zipper, but with a smaller head size it also works without one. Now you can sew the dress upper parts to the dress middle parts. Be careful to stitch close to the piping to make it as neat as possible. Go over it twice if needed. Do the two sides separately after each other to keep the V shapes of the pattern intact. You can also glue the seam allowance down afterwards to help with the shape. Afterwards, flip it inside out again and sew dress back middle and dress front middle together on the sides to form the top part of the dress. Then hem the sleeves. In my case, I wanted to make them invisible and therefore used an overlock seam and glued it to the inside using fabric glue like seen here. Now put it aside and take the dress back lower and dress front lower parts and sew them together on the sides. After that, you can join the dress in the middle as seen here. I then tried the dress on to mark where to cut the lower hem. I usually make it longer in the pattern to accommodate for slightly different fabrics and body heights. And after marking it down carefully and cutting the fabric back, the last step on the dress is to hem the lower open seam. Once again I overlocked and then glued the seam to the inside using fabric glue. After that I tried it on again and pinned the dress flaps in place like I wished them to be placed. Replace the pins by hand stitching in a few areas. Don't stitch around everything as it shapes to your body anyways. Here you can see where I stitched it down in the end. In the back I also closed the areas of the flaps that were left open from turning them around. And that's it, your dress is finished. Let's move on to the gloves then. Cut out all pattern parts needed once again. Here you can see me cutting out the ones for both the gloves and leggings already. Here you can see how we will sew the gloves now. Start off by sewing glove upper and glove middle to each other. After that, sew glove middle to the glove lower. This seam is a bit complicated, but just take your time. Iron the seams afterwards. Now you can join glove outside and inside on the side without the thumb. Finally, join the glove outside, inside and lower part. After that, you're able to close the back seam in one go. Just pin the borders of the fabric carefully so you can match them up while sewing. The last seam you have to do is the one between thumb and fingers. After that, cut down the seam allowance once again. And of course, you will have to do this all twice. How fun! Then you can hem the open seams. I just glued them to the inside as I did on the dress. And your gloves are complete. The last part is the leggings with the shoe covers. I take leggings middle 1 and 2 and sew them together. This will be a step by step because you can only go from one V shape to the next as seen here. This ensures that the end product will still have crisp edges. Afterwards, do the same with the leggings lower piece. And then with the leggings upper piece. Repeat this with the mirror pieces and hem the outer edges. Now we move on to the shoe cover parts. Sew shoe inside to the corresponding shoe outside piece. I then overlocked the lower seam allowance on these parts and also all around the shoe bottom. This is optional though. Then pin shoe bottom to the shoe outside and inside and sew around. Turn it around and glue the hem around the heel as seen here. You can test it on your shoe now. It should fit anything with a small heel between EU sizes 36 to 40. Back to the leggings. Close the leg seam on all of the brown fabric with brown thread. You can try it on afterwards and still shorten if needed. Then pin the shoe covers to the legging lower part and sew around. After that, close the rest of the leg seams with beige thread. Then sew the two leg parts together as seen here. The only thing missing now is the waistband. Take a piece of elastic at least 2.5 cm wide, wrap it around your waist to find the correct length and stitch it together. Then lay it on your leggings and pin or glue it to the inside. Afterwards, stitch it down. And there you have it, the leggings are complete too. Now your whole outfit is done, yay! I hope this tutorial helped you sew your own KEYLETH cosplay. You can find the patterns for it in my Etsy shop, link is in the description. Thank you, bye bye!